After giving coronavirus to the entire world, China is now giving a new kind of threat, and this one is silent, by the way. A deadly insect causing acute pain in the United States, and let me warn you here, Americans should be scared. I'm Driti and you're watching Skyline. This is the story of an invisible invasion, one that has already spread across America very silently. Ladies and gentlemen, it starts in Asia, specifically in China. A tiny insect, dark brown, almost black, barely a few millimeters long, easy to miss, easy to ignore. But this is no ordinary ant. Meet Brachyponera chinensis. Well, the Asian needle ant, a name that doesn't sound really threatening, but its sting, it feels exactly like it sounds, like a needle, driven straight into your skin. Now, here's the twist. This ant, it didn't just arrive in the United States recently. It has been there for decades. First detected in 1930s, very quiet, unnoticed, but something really changed. In the last few years, its population has exploded. Today, it has spread across at least 20 US states, from the humid forest of Florida and Georgia to the suburbs of New York, and even as far as north as Massachusetts and Wisconsin. This is no longer just a local problem. This is a nationwide presence. But you know why this ant is so dangerous? Because unlike other ants, you won't see it coming. There are no big anthills, no marching lines, no warning signs. It hides in leaf litter, inside rotting woods, under stones, in quiet, shaded areas, places where people they casually reach without thinking twice, and that is exactly when it strikes. Now let's talk about the sting here, because this is where it gets serious. Experts described it as like somebody inserting a needle into your flesh. The pain is not just sharp, well, it lingers. It comes, it goes, and then it comes back, sometimes lasting for hours. And in some cases, the pain, it spreads far beyond the sting site. But the real danger is not the pain. It's what happens next. Now, for some people, specifically those with allergies, this sting can trigger anaphylaxis, a condition that can turn deadly in minutes. Symptoms can include difficulty in breathing, swelling of the throat, rapid heartbeat, and a sudden drop in blood pressure. In simple terms, your body, it goes into shock. And without any immediate medical help, it can be fatal. In fact, there has already been deaths that are linked to such reactions, and that's what has triggered alarm among the health officials, because this is not just an environmental issue anymore. This is a public health concern. But here's something surprising, ladies and gentlemen. Despite all of this, the Asian needle ant is not naturally aggressive. It does not chase you. It does not swarm like an fire ant. It only attacks when it is disturbed, and that's exactly what makes it dangerous, because people don't even know it's here. They don't see it. They don't expect it until it's too late. And yes, the problem does not stop with humans here. This tiny insect is also disturbing the entire ecosystem. It is pushing out the native ant species, the one that helps forests survive. In fact, some ants spread seeds, some help plants grow, and this particular species, the new one, it replaces them. And when that happens, the entire balance of the forest, it begins to shift. Now the question is, why is it spreading so fast? Well, there are several reasons for that. It adapts easily to very different climates and environments. It hides extremely well in no visible nests, and most importantly, it looks like other ants. You might have already seen one though, and not even realize that you have seen one. And here comes the biggest problem. There is no clear way to eliminate it completely. That's right, pesticide baits, they can reduce the number, but they don't wipe it out. Experts say that this species, it is likely here to stay, just like many other species before that. Now, you know what that means for the people who are living in the United States? It means awareness is the key. People need to be very careful while gardening, while handling wounds or walking through the wooded area, because one careless moment can lead to a painful or even dangerous experience for you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's shift our focus to the streets of New York City. Well, in New York City, a familiar summer nightmare is returning. The spotted lanternfly. Scientifically, it is known as Lycorma delicatula. It is spreading for its annual comeback, and this time experts are warning that it could be bigger than before. Well, these are the insects that does not look very dangerous at first glance. Polka dot wings, very bright color, almost decorative like a butterfly. But don't be fooled here. This is the one that most invasive species in the United States today. Now, originally it is again from China. The spotted lanternfly was first detected in the US in 2014 in Pennsylvania. Just a few sightings though, nothing alarming, but within years it spread rapidly, reaching over 20 states including New York by 2020, and now it has already infiltrated half of New York's 62 counties. Well, from the crowded sidewalks of Manhattan to quiet residential neighborhoods to farms and vineyards upstate, this particular insect, it's everywhere. And here's what makes the whole situation unpredictable. Experts say sighting once doubled within a year, from 5,000 to nearly 10,000. Then numbers dipped kind of slowly, but that does not mean the threat is all gone. It means one thing: nobody knows how big this year's outbreak really will be, because these insects, they are adapting. They are surviving longer, up to 5 months more than before. They are reproducing faster. A single female can lay dozens of eggs multiple times before winter, and those eggs, they survive the cold only to hatch in the spring. Well, this is not just a seasonal problem anymore. It's a cycle. Now, the question is, what do? They feed, and that too constantly. They latch onto trees, plants, crops, and suck out sap, weakening everything they touch. Not always killing the plants instantly though, but slowly draining their strength. Over time, this affects agriculture, greenery, and entire ecosystem. But wait, here's where it gets even worse. They don't just damage the plants, they create a big mess. Well, as they feed, they release a very sticky substance called honeydew. Well, this honeydew, it attracts fungus, turning surface black, decks, sidewalks, cars, and even public spaces. Can you imagine walking down a street and something very sticky falls onto you from above? That's what residents are dealing with right now. And that's not all. Well, this residue, it also attracts other insects, including wasps. So one invasive species, it starts pulling in more and more. Now let's talk about why this matters for the Indians who are living in the New York City right now. The Indian community in New York, by the way, it is one of the largest and most active in the United States. Many work in small businesses, restaurants, grocery stores, transportation, outdoor services, and that's exactly where the impact hits the hardest. If you run a street side food stall, if you manage outdoor sitting, well, if you deal with fresh produce, these are the insects that becomes a daily problem for you. They land on the surfaces, they contaminate the area, they create hygiene concern. Now, for the Indian families living in suburban neighborhood, specifically those with gardens or balconies, the issue becomes personal. Children playing outside, clothes drying, plants growing, everything becomes vulnerable. Even community events like festivals, gatherings, outdoor celebration, it can be affected. Because when swarms arrive, they don't stay hidden. They fly, they land, they collide. As one expert put it, people don't like bugs hitting them in the face. Simple but real. And yes, then comes the economic impact here. Upstate New York's vineyards, specifically in regions like the Finger Lakes, they are at risk. Studies suggest losses could jump from millions to nearly $9 billion within just few years. And that affects jobs, supply chain, local economies, and indirectly communities that depend on them. So the question is, why are these insects thriving so much in cities like New York? Because cities are helping them evolve. That's the clear answer. Urban heat, less extreme winter, more structures to lay eggs on. That means walls, poles, vehicles. In fact, even a tree called Tree of Heaven, another invasive species, has become their perfect partner. It grows aggressively in streets and serves as a constant food source. In simple terms, one invader is helping another. Now the big question, can they be stopped? So far, not really. Campaigns encouraging people to swamp them, they have limited the success here. Campaigns encouraging people to swamp them have been limited success. Pesticides risk harming other insects like bees. Vacuuming them works in very small areas but not at a big scale. Even experts admit that complete elimination it is unlikely. The focus now is control, managing the number, slowly spreading. Here, some scientists, they are exploring natural solution here, like introducing biological control that targets these flies. In fact, others are even using trained dogs to detect hidden egg cluster. But all of this, it takes time. And the hat season, it's just few weeks away. Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving forward, China is not just giving diseases to the world. It is attacking the US indirectly too. Just when you think that Iran-Israel and the US war is only about missiles, drones and oil, there is another layer, one that operates quietly in the shadows. Because even as sanctions tighten and pressure builds, reports suggest that Chinese-linked firms are still supplying crucial dual-use components, engine batteries and technology that can power drone production in countries like Iran and Russia. Now let me flag this point that these are not always big and well-known corporations. Often they are smaller. In fact, their structure, it is very small, operating below the radar here, but playing a role in a much bigger game. In fact, on March 5th, right in the middle of an active strike between the US, Israel and Iran, an email reportedly surfaced from a China-based company expressing support for Iran and offering to supply the equipments. Now, whether every such claim is verified or not, the larger concern is real. Global supply chains are not fully controlled. And in modern warfare, you don't just fight on the battlefield. You fight through technology, through logistics, and through networks that stretch across continents. Now, while China is cornering the US, though, there is a very smart gameplay that is happening behind the scenes. A game of diplomacy. As the Strait of Hormuz, it remains partially shut and global trade continues to suffer. Washington is now openly pushing Beijing to step in. Well, just days before a high-stakes summit between Mr. Donald Trump and Mr. Xi Jinping in Beijing, US officials have made it clear that they want China to use its influence over Iran to reopen one of the world's most critical oil routes. In fact, the US Secretary of State, Mr. Marco Rubio, directly called on Chinese leaders to send a very strong message to Tehran. Well, his statement was blunt. He said Iran's action in the Strait, they are isolating it globally, and that China should make that clear. This came as Iran's Foreign Minister, Mr. Abbas Araghchi, he visited Beijing, where he met Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Note the timing here. The timing is not coincidence. It shows that diplomacy is now moving parallel with military escalation. And the reason is simple here. China has a lot at stakes. Unlike the United States, China's economy is deeply dependent on energy supplies passing through this narrow passage, the Strait of Hormuz. A significant portion of its crude oil and natural gas imports, it comes from the West Asia. So when Iran restrict movement in the strait, it does not just hurt global market, it directly hits Beijing. And that is why the US officials are arguing that it is China's own interest to step in and push Iran to ease its control. And at the very same time, Washington is also trying to ensure that China does not block international action. Well, at the United Nations Security Council, the US has been working to pass resolution aimed at reopening the strait and condemning Iran's action here. But for China, along with Russia, they had earlier vetoed a similar move, if you remember, arguing that it unfairly targeted Iran without addressing the role of the US and Israeli strikes that triggered the whole conflict. Now, behind the closed doors, American diplomats, they are just trying to persuade Beijing to change its stance. Even within Mr. Trump's administration, this push, it is being repeated at multiple levels. In fact, Treasury Secretary Mr. Scott Bessent, he has also urged China to play a more active role here. He made it clear that reopening the Strait of Hormuz, it is not just a regional issue, it is a global necessity. Because right now the disruption is affecting not just oil shipments but the entire supply chain across Asia. Interestingly, there are signs that China has already been quietly involved here. That's right, reports suggest that Beijing played a role in encouraging Iran to agree to a temporary ceasefire earlier. As the largest buyer of Iranian oil, China has leverage, and it appears that it has used its leverage to bring Tehran back to the negotiating table, at least briefly. But Washington believes that that's not enough. It wants China to go further and actively push for a full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. In the meantime, Mr. Donald Trump has taken a slightly more measured tone publicly. He acknowledged that China has not directly challenged the US position, but at the very same time, he continues to pressure Iran to step back. In fact, he even pointed out that China depends heavily on the oil flowing through the Hormuz, suggesting that Beijing cannot afford a prolonged disruption here. But you know what? This relationship, it's not really simple. The United States has long accused China of indirectly supporting Iran's military capabilities, specifically through dual-use components that can be used in missiles and drone program. While Mr. Trump, he has claimed that Mr. Xi Jinping, he assured him that China does not supply weapons to Iran, speculations and suspicion that remains. In fact, Mr. Trump even claimed that the US forces intercepted a vessel carrying what he described as a gift from China to Iran, though details, they were never fully disclosed. And yes, alongside diplomatic pressure, economic pressure is also being used here. The US Treasury has imposed sanctions on Chinese refineries and dozens of shipping companies accused of transporting Iranian oil. Now, these sanctions, they cut them off from the US financial system, sending a clear message that doing business with Iran, it comes at a cost. And at the very same time, China is preparing its own agenda for the upcoming summit. One key issue is Taiwan. That's right, Beijing has signaled that it will push Washington to reduce arms sales to Taiwan. Basically a move that it sees as a critical one to maintain stability. However, the US views Taiwan very differently, making this another major point of tension between the two super powerful nations. So what we are seeing right now, it's not just a regional war, it's a global power equation unfolding in real time. The US is fighting Iran directly, but at the very same time, it is negotiating, it is pressurizing and coordinating with China. Because in today's world, even a single choke point like the Strait of Hormuz can pull multiple superpowers in the same crisis. And yes, that brings us back to the bigger picture. Ladies and gentlemen, this whole conflict is no longer just about missiles and military strike. It is about influence. It is about supply chain. It is about who controls the flow of energy and who has the power to stop it. Because in 2026, wars are not just fought in isolation. They are interconnected, they are layered, and they are global. And tonight, as we close this story, step back and look at a bigger picture here. This is not just about one insect, one country, or one war. This is about how a single spark, whether biological, technological, or geopolitical, it can travel across borders and reshape the entire world. From a teeny ant hiding under leaves, to drones flying over the battle zones, to oil routes that decides the fate of global economies, everything is interconnected. The world is no longer divided by geography. It is connected by consequences, and that means what begins in one corner of the world, it does not stay there anymore. Well, it definitely spreads, it escalates, and it impacts everyone. So the real question is not whether the next crisis will begin. The real question is, will the world be ready when it does? I'm Driti and this is Skyline. Stay informed, stay aware, because the next big story is already unfolding.